Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Think with a Drink. This is the weekly web show brought to you by the ARIES Foundation for Financial Education. And this week's episode, we are doing Roth accounts and Roth conversions. So sort of understanding the ins and outs and the workings about how a Roth IRA is different from a traditional IRA. And I just lost my mic. How about that? Thank you.
And when that conversation makes sense for anybody who's still listening.
There we go. All right, next slide. God bless. So our agenda for this show, we're going to do some Roth basics, just covering the ground on that, how conversions work, what a backdoor Roth is all about, and why it might make sense for somebody to consider. Next slide. So we told you Think with a Drink is brought to you by the ARIES Foundation for Financial Education. We are a nonprofit. We are located in Newton. You can find us on the web at ariesfoundation.org. The mission behind ARIES is trying to help everyone have a better relationship with their money, because whether you realize it or not, you are in a personal relationship with your money, just like every other relationship that you have, that there are certain behaviors and triggers that occur that can cause us to act, well, sometimes a little irrationally. My name is Tom Alessi. I am the president of the ARIES Foundation. I've been in financial services for 24 years now. I'm an investment advisor. That means I act as a fiduciary whenever I'm giving guidance or advice to my clients. I'd like to introduce my vice president. Craig, if you want to introduce yourself.
Sure. So I'm Craig Richardson. I'm the vice president of the ARIES Foundation. I've been in financial services a little over 20 years now, and I specialize in working with families and individuals to help them to find their financial goals and have a better relationship with their money.
So next slide. So we call this Think with a Drink because what we're trying to do is take finances, money matters, things that tend to be a little challenging, a little daunting, a little intimidating for people, and make it more casual, more relaxed, and hopefully, on our part, a little bit more fun. And we can't think of a better way to do that than as if we have something cold to sip on as we're doing it. And this week's episode, we're drinking, it's Autumn Winds. This is from Gray Sail Brewing down in Rhode Island. It's an Oktoberfest. It's called a Fest beer, but essentially an Oktoberfest. Oktoberfest for food pairings, you want to think, sausages and grilled meats.
Yum.
Yes. Getting hungry now.
Hungry, right.
Right. Pretzels, right? That type of thing, right? So, skål.
Skål. Now I need some pretzels.
All right. So Roth, real quick on the basics with Roths, right? So the concept here with the Roth IRA is that you put the money in, it's after-tax money, it grows tax deferred, and then when it's taken out, it is tax free.
It's awesome.
Awesome. So there are limitations, however. The most that you can put into it if you are under 50 years old is $6,000.
Right.
If you are over 50 or turning 50 this year, that number has gone to $7,500. So there was a $500 bump on what is known as the catch-up provision. So again, under 50 you can do $6,000, over 50 you can do $7,500 into a Roth IRA.
So it's a bonus for getting older.
Here's a bonus for getting older. They know we got to add more and catch up a little bit, basically. However, there are still other limitations. If you make more, if you're single, and you make more than $144,000, you are right out. That's it. You cannot participate, you cannot open and fund a Roth IRA. It actually starts at 129, but the phase out goes to 144. So if you're over 144, forget it, you can't do it. If you're married and filing jointly, right, that number, the max is 219. If you make over 219, you cannot open a Roth, you cannot fund a Roth in that manner. I believe the phase out starts somewhere in the low 200s. I think like 204 to be exact, but don't quote me on that in terms of what's there. Nope, go back. Oh, it's right there. So there you go. Sorry.
Well, it didn't give you the phase out. It just gave you the limits.
The numbers. Oh, those are these are the 2023 limits. Sorry, I apologize for that. See, that's why I should just follow the slides.
You said 144, right? 138, right?
Yeah, it's 138 for single. That's where it starts now. It goes to 154.
Okay.
See, that's what the difference is. The phase out begins at 138. It phases out at 154 in 2023. And if you're married, right, again, 218 phases out, it's like 230 something where you can't. If you make more than that, you're out as far as going through that. So next slide. All right, so this is talking about the options, the other way that you can do this. So here's one of the things that happens. We just said that there's a limitation on who can put in or who can open and fund a Roth IRA.
Correct.
Right? However, in your retirement plan, there is this little ability to add Roth 401k. Now the Roth 401k works the same way as a Roth IRA, meaning you're putting in after-tax dollars, it's growing tax deferred, and when you take it out, it's
Tax-free.
tax-free. However, there's no limitation on who can open and who can fund a Roth 401k.
Right, so it's only an individual retirement account. One you own yourself, that the limitation comes into play.
Correct. So if you're somebody who's a high earner, or your spouse happens to be, good for you. Your spouse
Right.
is a high earner, you're not, but you go over the married file jointly limit, you can still participate in a Roth 401k. And so the question becomes, is this something that your employer has made available? It is nothing more than flipping a switch in just about every retirement plan that is available, specifically in the 401k space. 403bs, those are nonprofits, a little bit different, but they're still available. But the question is, has your employer made it available? Because this is something that everyone should take a look at when we talk about, and again, for one of our previous episodes, we talked about no pension, no problem. Talked about having multiple buckets.
Right.
So having a tax-free bucket for income is a huge benefit in terms of dealing with the money I'm taking out, I'm not getting taxed on now.
Right, you just have to remember that you're not going to get a deduction for that contribution today like you would in your standard 401k, because that comes out pre-tax as opposed to post-tax.
Right, and then we'll get into that a little bit with the the tax brackets and how that works and why sometimes this makes sense, sometimes it doesn't, depending on what bracket that you're in. But the conversation is that what everybody should be having this conversation with your employer. If you don't have the option, access to Roth 401k, to ask your employer why not. Why are we not offering it? Why isn't it part of the plan? Just because whether it's you or someone else, it might be something that's beneficial to have access to.
Absolutely, because you may probably get into it later, but also Roths aren't subject to required minimum distributions. And we were talking in an earlier episode about longevity that people have in retirement today. Well, they've changed a lot of this code with the Secure Act, but they're still going to have to take out distributions at some point.
Right.
So, are you pulling it out at a safe rate of return?
Yes. Next slide. All right, so this is where we get into a little, the little squirrely part in terms of this with this whole tax situation, right? So the concept here is trying to show, all right, look, these are the adjusted tax rates, right? So this is just giving you example of what happens with taxes in retirement, right? So I may be in a 22% tax bracket, but my adjusted tax rate is 18.6. This is what's showing. And then it's showing that there's one column that just jumps up and says, wait, it's 49%. Like,
Eesh.
How the heck did that happen, right? So wait a minute. And what it is that when you're dealing with retirement income and you're pulling money out of retirement, everything can be subject to taxes. Specifically, any of the money that's in those retirement accounts, 401ks, IRAs, that's all ordinary income tax, right? So that's I'm in my 22% tax bracket.
Right.
But you may drive a single amount, like an additional $1,000, may trip you and start triggering you to get your Social Security benefit taxed. You may trip a higher number in terms of capital gains being taken out. And so where I took an extra $1,000, I thought I was just going to pay, $220 on it. Instead, what happens is because it taxed my Social Security, because capital gains got triggered up, next thing you know, it cost me 50% of my money.
Ugh. Okay, so you got to be very careful with those brackets.
Exactly, and this is why Roth becomes part of that conversation. Instead of pulling the $1,000 out of my taxable account, my 401k, my IRA, if I had a Roth available to me, I could take the 1,000 out of my Roth bucket, and then I don't have that. I didn't change any of my taxes. I didn't affect my Social Security. I didn't affect my Medicare. I didn't affect my capital gains bucket.
Well, I saved in a lot of ways. I saved on the tax dollars. My money kept growing, and I was able to pull out tax-free money. Yeah.
Next slide. Right, so this just goes into this.
How did that happen?
Hey, how did that happen? So you can slide through them. There should be a little bit of an explanation to it that goes along. If you click on it, there we go. So, what happened there is that, as I said, that $1,000, if you were in a 12% bracket, right? So next thing you know, you got triggered, that extra 1,000 triggered a tax on Social Security, and then it triggered a higher tax on your capital gains, and next thing you know, you wound up with an extra, huge amount of tax burden just by taking the money out.
Yeah, so that last 1,000 cost you $500.
Yeah. And that's what can be avoided with Roth. So that's one of the features. Like, you have to be thinking about, because one of the things we talk to everybody about is taxes in retirement, and how am I offsetting or keeping myself in that same tax bracket, but in this case, keeping myself in the tax bracket, but not pushing myself into that additional Social Security tax and all the other penalties that can happen.
So if it wasn't confusing enough, I got to worry about this now too.
Oh, it just becomes a major concern when dealing with all of that. Next slide. All right, so should I convert, right? What to consider when doing a Roth, right? So, there's a lot of pieces of moving parts when we talk to people about converting Roth. So now, this is not I'm opening a Roth. This is now I am taking my money that's sitting in a qualified account. A qualified account for us, just for everybody, is pre-tax. That means IRA, 401k, SEP, simple, 403b, anything that you put money in and the government hasn't gotten their piece of it yet.
Okay.
Right?
Right.
So pre-tax, okay, as far as that's concerned. What the government said many, many years ago was it doesn't matter how much you make, it doesn't matter how much you have, you can go ahead and convert it.
Oh, good. 'Cause I thought you were talking about religion.
Yes, no.
Okay.
We're going to convert it. We're going to convert it to a Roth, right? You're allowed to convert the money to a Roth. So there should be the first warning flag for everybody, right? So that should be the first signal that the minute the government is saying
It's got to be something in it for the government. Absolutely.
It's okay to do this,
Yay.
right? There should be,
All right.
then everybody should be taking a step back, right? So the consideration is, what is it going to mean when you convert this? You've got to pay the tax. And specifically, depending on what you're earning today, you're paying the ordinary tax rate today, but all of that is going to affect whatever tax bracket you're in today, which means if I took a huge chunk of it, because you can pretty much do what you want, I'm going to trigger a higher tax. I could move myself into a higher tax bracket today than I currently am in.
So you could end up paying more tax on it today than you would have paid in the future because of the tax bracket.
Possibly. That is one of the things, and this comes up a lot, like, well, where is it going to be in the future? And, what I'm paying now, it's because I'm earning, so, what do I do?
Right.
So that's one of the biggest things with converting Roth is to generally be thinking about, wait, I've also got 5 years that I have to hold it. Still got the 59 and a half thing. So for IRAs, 401ks, if you take the money out prior to age 59 and a half, you're going to get hit with a 10% penalty.
Correct. Yep.
Same
in addition to the tax.
Correct.
Right.
Same thing works with a Roth, but if you hold it for 5 years, it's what you season the money essentially, and that means that sort of gets pushed off in terms of dealing with it. So there's a little bit that you need to deal with that. Next slide. So, it gets into the whole the conversation there by, when am I using the money and what am I using it for? So if I converted it and I took, let's just use round numbers. We're sitting here at the bar with beers in front of us.
Okay.
Let's use $100,000, right?
I couldn't even get through the brackets earlier, so.
So let's use $100,000. I took $100,000. Let's just use the round numbers, 25% between federal and state, what I'm paying in taxes. So that means $100,000. I paid $25,000 in taxes. I've got $75,000.
Okay.
Right. If I did that, and I took my 100,000 and I converted it, I would have 75,000 now sitting in my Roth IRA, tax-free.
Right.
Right. It's going tax deferred, and it's going to be tax-free when I take it out. You'd feel pretty good about it.
Sure.
However, when we get to retirement, more than likely, we are not just going to take it all out in one lump sum.
Probably not.
Probably not. More than likely, we're going to let it continue to do what it should be doing, which is investing and growing and building on itself. And I'm only going to use it to sort of fill in as I need it. Had I taken the 100,000 and just left it there, let it grow,
Yep.
and then take it out in drips and drabs and little pieces as I'm filling in because I need my retirement income, the offset between the two from a tax savings plan is pennies.
Yeah, you almost never catch up.
Well, it's because you dropped it by 25,000.
Right.
So
you got to make up the 25% first.
Right, and then you say, well, out in the future, right, the tax is going to be much higher. Well, yeah, but I'm not taking out that much. Well, again, I didn't take it all out in a lump sum. If you take it out in a lump sum, that's a different conversation. Where it works and when it makes sense is that I can take the 100,000 and convert it, but use money from someplace else, a bank or somewhere else, to pay the conversion privilege. Because that way I'm not affected. Now I've got 100,000 sitting in this Roth IRA. That will be significantly more than the other examples that I showed.
Yeah, the other place it works is if you have a significant write-off in a particular year. You're actually showing a loss. So you're not going to be paying tax because you have the credit.
Right. Yeah, and the other thing is that, you know, it's, again, unless you really know what your tax rate is going to be, you can be triggering a lot of this stuff, and you cannot undo it, right? There's no redo. There's no do-over. You can't go, yeah, no, I didn't want to do that. You know, once you do it, you're stuck, okay? Next slide. All right, so the idea with laddering, right? So Roth, this is the concept, and we sort of think this works for a lot of people as you're sort of building out that retirement income and that scenario of what I'm trying to do. The idea isn't connecting, like if we go back to that 100,000, I'm going to convert all of it. Instead, it might be, well, I'm in a adjusted tax rate, but my tax bracket is 22% right now. If I converted 10,000, I'm going to stay in that 22%.
Right. Anything that's over that next threshold, under that next threshold, you can convert. Right. And stay down there.
And stay down. And I'm not pulling Social Security right now because I'm still working, so I don't have to worry about triggering Social Security tax yet. So there's a way to do it, and then to think, okay, I'm pulling this out. I mean, one of the other ways of laddering is to think, I want to have X amount. Right? We talk about passive income and generating income streams. Well, I want to be able to generate whatever amount a month tax-free. So I want to pull money out from my traditional accounts and put them into a Roth so I can do that. But in order to do that, you've got to have that 5-year.
Right.
If I can't move something over and then expect to use it in a year or two because I got to wait 5 years for it. So this laddering strategy does take a little bit of forethought. It does take a little bit of time in terms of dealing with it. Something to really be thinking about as we go through it. You know, one of the reasons to avoid any of this with the Roths is that you're paying the taxes today.
Right. Right.
You are stuck, no matter what. You're going to have to pay the taxes on this money. It's sitting there in the IRA and 401ks. We always get asked that. Like, can I do something for it? Like, yeah, no. The government wants their money. They're going to get their money. But there are ways to be, let's call it smart, about how you're dealing with this withdrawal and how we're now taking it. Like we said, if the 401k Roth option is available, maybe you've put a lot of money into your traditional IRA, into your traditional 401k.
Right, right.
And now you can offset that and say, well, now I'm going to start, threading some of the money into the Roth portion.
The non-taxable. Yeah, because like I said, it works out for lots of different reasons depending on each person's situation. Like you said, number one is, can I keep my Social Security from being taxed? Right, because I'm not drawing all that money out of my 401k. The second thing is there longevity in my family, and I don't want to be subject to the required minimum distribution tax.
Right.
Right. So that's another reason that you would look at that. Also, Medicare. Right. Don't you get surcharged on Medicare if your MAG is over a certain level?
Correct.
That's another reason to try to keep that
just so you know, is modified adjusted gross income.
Yes, that's what the acronym stands for. It's not MAGA.
Oh yeah, no, we're not making America great yet. Next slide. So you might have heard some conversation about the idea of a backdoor IRA. So this concept, essentially, and it is still open. They've been trying to close it now for like a year and a half, or close to that in terms of time frame. But the idea is I can open because maybe I make too much money. Maybe I'm over the threshold, or maybe my spouse is doing really well, and that triggers us that we file jointly. We can't open and fund a Roth IRA. But what I can do is I can open a traditional IRA. I can then take that money and convert it over to the Roth, and I will only have to pay on the time frame that it was in the growth for what's there. So it does still exist. There are, definitely caveats and problems with it that come in if you're trying to do this. One, the IRS really says that the money needs to be there for like a year. You'll hear different strategies out there. They'll talk about, making sure it was there at least 3 months or 4 months or something. We don't ever want to get in trouble with anybody. So we always say, look, the letter of the law says to have it be in for this amount of time. That's what you should do if you're going to do it. Just understand, though, if you did have some other contributions and other things, it can get tied together. So if you did the maximum withdrawal, the 7,500, the maximum IRA contribution, you were able to do that, then you tried to convert it. If you had other monies, it's going to look at it and say, well, this was only 6% or 7.5%. If you had $100,000 back to the $100,000, there's only 7.5% of that. So you're only going to get a break on the 7.5% of whatever you just did, and you only end up saving like $400. So there really isn't much there. Next one, we go into what is the mega backdoor Roth IRA.
Mega backdoor.
Yeah.
Next sound effects for that one.
The mega backdoor, right? So the mega backdoor Roth. This is really for those who are in plans, 401k retirement plans that are allowing you to do after-tax contributions. So here's the way, this is what the one they're really trying to close the door on. Because if you follow, for this year, if you are over 50 years old, 2023, the maximum contribution that you can put into a 401k plan is $30,000. Right? You get $22,500 plus an additional catch-up, it's $30,000. If your plan allows you to put after-tax money in, you can contribute up to almost that same amount of money. 20, 30,000. Everybody said, well, that's after tax. If I take it out, it's going to trigger, the growth gets taxed on me. It triggers, like Craig said, Medicare surcharges, triggers all sorts of other things that go on. But one of the things that most plans, and you'll have to check with your plan provider to see that it is allowed for your plan. Most plans allow you to take that after-tax money that's sitting in that after-tax 401k contribution and convert it directly to a Roth IRA.
Wow.
So I could be putting $30,000 in, possibly, and then immediately converting that to a Roth 401k.
Wow.
Which means I now have a bucket of after-tax money that is tax-deferred, that will be tax-free in retirement. So you need to look at your plan documents, and this is something we can help everybody in, because a lot of times it's deciphering what the plan is doing and going through that and sort of trying to figure out, does this make sense? Does this not make sense? What am I trying to do in terms of figuring it out? But it is still available. It's still open. They are trying to close this. I don't know that they'll do it this year, but it's been on the table now for talks for a couple of the past legislative sessions about trying to close this loophole because they're not getting their money, and they're not happy about it.
But it is an issue, though. I mean, you talk about highly compensated employees, someone making $100,000 plus. If their limit is $30,000, what they can put in their retirement, it does make it more difficult for them to achieve that same lifestyle in retirement. Right. So this is a great opportunity for them. But like you said, the government wants their tax dollars. They got to pay that debt, and they don't want you hiding every dollar.
Correct. Next slide. Real quick, you can buzz through that, which is just, why a Roth makes sense, right? There's no required distribution. Like Craig said, you don't have to take the money out. IRAs, traditional 401ks, you've got required minimum distributions. It's tax-free. As Craig said, it does not affect your modified adjusted gross income. Modified adjusted gross income is what Medicare is hitting you with your surcharges on. And those surcharges don't go away. Once you have them, they're very, very difficult to try to get away from, right? And it's just like any other IRA. So there's a named beneficiary. The money's going to go. You don't have to worry about probate. Don't have to worry about estate. All of that is beneficial as far as a Roth. Next slide. All right, so if anybody has any conversation, need any questions, if you're not really sure, gee, I don't know how to even start on this whole conversation.
I say we confused me today.
Yeah,
I don't know if it confused anybody else.
About trying to put this in order, about trying to figure it out, about trying to say, well, wait, does this make sense for me? What am I set up at? And like we talk about a lot, which is buckets, which is how am I generating my income in retirement? Should I have this Roth bucket? Should I have something that's tax-free income to me? Does it make sense? What you can do, you can see that QR code that's on the screen. Just hit the pause button, stop it right now, take out the phone, hit that QR code. It's going to open up our calendar, schedule a time. There's no cost, there's no obligation. We're happy to answer questions that anybody has just to see, what makes sense for you, how we might be able to support or help you, or even just say, hey, am I on the right path? Am I on the right road?
Yeah, I mean, one thing you got to remember, the other no is there's no redo in retirement.
Yes.
Right? So get the information you need now, be efficient with what you're doing, and really reach out and get good advice. Make sure you're doing the right thing for yourself.
All right, so if you do have any questions, you can always find us on the web. It's ariesfoundation.org. The email is info@ariesfoundation.org. And, like Craig said, you're going to have to you're going to have to write down that link that's on there because the QR code isn't on this screen. But you can write down that's the link that will actually open up our calendar. You can schedule a time with us. We're happy to have a meeting with anybody, answer any questions. That's why we're here. That's why the foundation is in place. And on that note, we're going to say thanks. Good night.